a simple tutorial project, a simple tutorial game in Unity. And the objective is that while creating this game, we're going to learn. For some of you who have already learned, we're going to kind of solidify the basics of the building blocks of Unity games, and so that includes adding game objects to the scene, adding lighting, working with the camera, working with textures and materials, working with scripts, working with sound effects, working with a GUI, with the graphical interface. That also includes keeping everything organized, keeping your project organized and well documented, so that it will be easy for you to come back and edit later, or for other people taking over your project. And so the particulars of our tutorial game. I'm going to begin sharing my desktop. Hi, David. The particulars of our tutorial game will be very simple. What we'll do is we'll create a little ball, and that ball will roll around. We'll make a movement script so that we can roll the ball around. We will have walls that the ball can bump into. And we will have objects in the scene that are collectible, that when you run into them with the ball, you collect them, and they'll play a little sound effect. And we will also want to have a graphical user interface, which is not on this example yet. We'll be getting to that in later weeks, that will show your score and maybe show maybe have like a pause button or some other information for you, maybe a timer. We could do that, or whatever other creative ideas you guys might have. And ultimately, rather than what you see on the screen here is just just a simple little square that I'm moving around in, but we'd like to create kind of an entire level. Where you would roll your ball, through the level and collect all the items if you can, and get to the end. And we might have with our GUI, with our graphical user interface, we might have a message pop up, telling you that you won, and so forth. Part of an important part of this project is going to be trying to make it look cool. So we'll learn how to add materials and textures to not just we'll learn how to change colors of these objects, but we'll also learn how to put in cool textures, and we will learn how to do some different things with lighting, with the camera. And that is about it. Any questions on the kind of the goals for the next few weeks? Oh, that's right. The thing I forgot to mention is that we'll work in the custom 3D models with Brent as well. So we'll learn how to create something in Blender and import it into Unity, so that maybe instead of collecting, like I have here, I have this little box that we're collecting. Maybe that could be something cool that you modeled in Blender. Any questions? Going once, going twice. Okay. Let's see. Can you, if you on WebEx, if you click, I think if you click participants, you have a raise hand button. Can you click raise hand if you're with me? Okay, there are hands, and I see Shirley's on mobile, so Shirley might not actually have a raise hand button. Okay. Great, thanks. You can, yeah. Okay, fantastic. So Alex, David, and I know Shirley said she's not at a computer she can use right now. But Alex, David, and Travis, do you guys each have Unity installed on your machine? So can you guys, are you guys able to open Unity? Maybe give me a raised hand if you're all set up.
I don't have Unity. How do you get it?
Okay, brilliant question. How do we get Unity? You will go online, and in fact, if you just search for Unity 3D, if you Google for Unity 3D, it should be the first thing that comes up. Looks like there's a link here in the top right to download Unity. This is free. There is a paid version that does some extra tricks. And actually, it looks like you get a 30-day trial of Unity Pro. We won't need the paid version for anything that we're doing right now. So I will go ahead and paste this version in the box, in the chat box, or this link in the chat box. Yeah. So again, no need to get the paid version for what we're doing. Free version is pretty cool all on its own. Now I should mention, Alex, that that does take a while to download and install. So I guess you can go ahead and get that going, and we'll keep going with kind of our introductory lesson today. And don't worry, we can get you caught up if you if you have questions next week once it's installed and everything. So don't fret that you won't be able to kind of play along with all the examples, because that does take a while to download and install. Okay. So once you have downloaded Unity, you will want to create a new project. And we'll go ahead and go through this process again here. Go through a new project, and I'm actually not going to keep this, so you will want to name this something something meaningful. Project, and since I already have a rolling ball game that I made last week, I'm not going to keep this one. I'm going to name it Rolling Ball 2. I can save my changes to my old example there. Okay, so I've just created a new project, and when you create a new project, you end up with an empty scene with just a camera. That's what you start out with. We're going to add some things to the scene. I know some of you guys have worked with this before, so we're not going to go into too much detail. If you're not able to follow this, we can get you caught up in due time when you get your own copy of Unity up and running. So we're just going to start out by making a plane that's going to be kind of the ground, or at least the starting point for the ground of our level. And I'm going to make sure that I place it at 0, 0, 0. Okay, this is 0, 0, 0, and again in three-dimensional space, there's an x coordinate, a y coordinate, and a z coordinate. I do want to position my camera a little bit higher, so you can see I have kind of a shallow angle that I'm looking at the scene there. So I'm gonna move my camera up by clicking on the yellow arrow in the scene. I can move my camera around that way. I can also go up here to click rotation to change the angle of my camera. And we can switch back to this is called the translate tool, or the transform tool. Oops, that was not the angle I wanted. I want to rotate red, there we go. Okay, so that's kind of the camera angle I want on my ground. And I can go ahead and save. And so now when I click save, this is going to save this scene. Okay, each project is made up of multiple scenes. It's kind of like having multiple levels if you have more than one level. So when I save scene, I'm going to just call this scene 1. You know, maybe I would want to call it, you know, level 1 if I have a whole bunch of levels, or maybe each level has a name. So I'll just call this level 1 for now. And there we go. Okay. Now, if I look through the camera, I can see everything's kind of dark right now. I want to add light to my scene, so I'm going to create what we call a directional light. And directional light, the thing about a directional light is that it doesn't matter where you put it. It just means that everything in the scene gets light coming from a certain direction. So the position of the directional light doesn't matter in the slightest. I'm just going to kind of move it out of the way. And now we have light on our scene. And it's still at this point kind of it's just kind of a plain white plane. So let's see what I can do about that. What we can do is we can add a material to this plane so that it won't just be plain white. So I can go to my assets pane and right click and go to create. Alternatively, I can go up here to assets and go to create and go down to material. Okay, material is going to change, you know, the way things look. I'm going to call this my ground material. So it's going to be the ground of my level. And you can see my ground, when I click my ground material in the assets pane down here, I have the option to change the color. Okay, make it blue or green, you know, whatever I want. Okay. And then if I want to apply that to the plane, I have a couple options. One way I can do that is I can just click and drag. So I'm clicking on my material and dragging up to the plane on my hierarchy over here. The hierarchy is just a list of everything in my scene. So now I have 3 things. I have my light, my camera, my plane. And when I dragged that material onto the plane, it made it green, applied that material. And there we go, now it's green. Now what if I don't just want it to be a plain color? What if I want what if I want it to look like grass, or I want it to look like concrete, or something like that? The way we do that is we will use an image. We'll have an image file that goes on this material, and the material will actually use that image instead of just the plain color. There are some different ways to apply that image, or to get that image. Of course, you can make images yourself using Photoshop or GIMP or whatever image editing software you might use if you're a great artist. You can also download some stuff from online. And in fact, as part of that Unity website we just saw a little bit ago, there's something called the Asset Store. And the Asset Store has a variety of different things that you can use in your Unity games, everything from 3D models to sound effects, some complete projects that are examples that you can look at. Those are pretty cool. Scripts, and pertinent to today, we have textures and materials. Now, the thing about the Asset Store, some of the things in the Asset Store are free. Some of them are not free. Now, for right now, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I'm doing this as we're making this kind of as a hobby at this point. You know, I don't think there's any reason why we would want to purchase anything, but there's lots of great free stuff. So in fact, there's different categories of textures they have here. I'm going to have a look at concrete. There's some concrete textures that are offered for free. So if I wanted to get these, I could click on that package and open in Unity, and this would download that texture pack for me. In fact, another thing I could do is I can go to Assets and import new asset, and I should be able, since I've already downloaded one of these projects in another one of my Unity projects, I should be able to import that from my other project. Okay, so I've just, instead of downloading these files from the website, since I already had them downloaded, I'm just going to import them from other files on my computer. Okay, so what we have here is just some dirt on the ground. And what this is a .tga, which is a texture. Okay, that's a texture, which means it's an image I can use on a material. So what I can do here is I can go to my ground material, and instead of just having it be green, I'm going to use my option here to select ground. And you can see it's actually using kind of a mixture of my main color, which is green, and the ground texture, which is that image. So it's sort of making it a green image, which is kind of interesting. I think I can set this to white to get kind of the default look for that texture that kind of the artist intended. Although the green was kind of interesting too, wasn't it? All these are kind of interesting. Alex, do you have a question?
Sure, like draw them and stuff, or like, how would you make your own texture?
How would you make your own texture? Good question.
Could you like do it in PowerPoint or something?
So, well, you could. I don't know that PowerPoint would be quite the right program. If you're really good at using GIMP or Photoshop, those are good programs. I'm not particularly good with GIMP. It's kind of not my area of expertise, but I could try using, say, Microsoft Paint. And let's say I want to make sort of a grassy texture. So I could, try and make a bunch of green. Obviously, I'm not a brilliant artist, and just want to make kind of a quick example here. So there we go. You can see why I'm not a brilliant artist, but there you go. There we have some grass for you, and I'm not sure if it's really going to matter what type of file I save it as.
You have to save it as a TGA or no?
Well, yeah, see, the question is, I'm not sure if I have to have it converted to a TGA or not. I'm actually not sure about that. We will find out. Okay, there's my grass texture. So let's say what if, so the question is, do I need to have it at TGA? Oh, well, that works. Oh, so PNG works just fine. I'm not entirely sure what all the differences are between TGA and you know, the different image file formats. But that appears to have worked. Now, one thing I can do here, I'm glad this came up because this is a good thing to note about, you know, when you use image textures for your materials, is you can control something called the tiling. Okay, so I can right now by default it's just one. It says 1 by 1, 1 X tiling, 1 Y tiling. If I change these, it means it's going to repeat the texture. Okay, now I'm repeating it twice as I go along the X direction. I can repeat it twice again as I go along the Y direction, and so see now there's like 4. For you know, for my texture, since it's, you know, kind of, you know, I think this is going to look better if I have a whole bunch. Okay, so there it's like a whole bunch of little patches of grass. And there you go. There's your grass texture. And, you know, maybe I would, you know, if I were a really good artist and if I were taking time to make it look good, you know, hopefully it could look better than that. But that's how you would draw your own. Yeah, great question. And sure, it looks like info from Shirley in the chat box there about JPEGs versus PNGs. Pretty cool.
Well, PNGs don't have a background, and JPEGs always have to be a square.
Ah, interesting. Okay, cool. One more thing to note about these textures is that if I go to my material and I pick, you know, there are a bunch of different options for you know, each of these does something kind of just a little bit different. One of the options is I can pick bumped diffuse, and that gives me the option for not just a base image, but also what's called a normal map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to the this ground, which is again is something I downloaded for free out of the asset store. And I'm going to go ahead and undo the tiling. And when I downloaded that off the asset store, it came with something called a normal map, which looks kind of like that that image right there in the bottom right of my screen. And what I can do is I can select that normal map, and well, if we get just a little bit more, oops. Okay, that light is now too bright. Yeah, there we go. Okay, perfect. You'll notice the difference. Now it looks, there's some depth to it. It looks kind of 3D-ish. And that's because the normal map gives it the effect of looking kind of bumpy. You know, it changes the way the light plays on it, and this won't actually affect the physics of the game. It's not actually, you know, it's not actually bumpy as your character walks over it, but it will kind of look bumpy when you look at it, which is pretty cool. And this is a technique that is used almost universally in video games and computer games today, having normal maps like this that appear It appears like it has, it doesn't just look flat. It appears like it has, depth to it, even though in the game it doesn't function like it actually does. So, tell you what, why don't we, as an exercise, for those of you who have Unity up and running already, why don't we go ahead and add, if you haven't already, add a plane to your scene and try, and add a directional light and try making your own texture and or downloading one for free out of the Unity store. You may need to make an account in order to download something from Unity. It asks you for an email address and so forth, but it should be pretty quick. Some of the texture packs that you download from Unity can take a long time to download, so do be aware of that. I'll kind of do an example here of downloading this concrete pack, especially when you're running WebEx. I found that it tends to run a little slower. Here we go. I can go ahead and click download. And there it goes. So this is downloading for me. You guys go ahead and see if you can get a scene going, and maybe in a couple minutes I can pass the ball to one or both of you guys, and you can show off what you've made. If you notice, when I downloaded this textures pack, there are a whole bunch of these. Looks like there's actually 20 different patterns. And I don't really want all of them. That's going to start to clutter up my project. So I'm just going to pick one or two of these that I like. Maybe I'll take this one. How about this one? And that'll be just fine for me. And I'll click import. And when I do that, they show up in my assets folder. Yeah, it is a big program. It's a really cool program, but along because of that, it does take a long time to download and install. So Travis and David, if you guys that do have Unity already installed, I can go ahead and start adding more objects to your scene if you'd like. Okay. Oh, hey, great. Good news, Alex. Well, Alex gets starts a new project. Could I pass the ball to David or Travis? Either of you guys would be willing to share your screen here for a second? We have a volunteer. Okay, David just volunteered in chat. Okay, so I'm going to pass David the ball, which is going to unshare my screen here. And there's your face. Okay, it's a masterpiece. Very nice. Mm-hmm. So as you're positioning the ball, one thing to note is that when you add a sphere, when you first add a sphere, by default, it's going to have a diameter of 1 unit. Okay, that if you remember your geometry, it means it has a radius of 0.5, so it's 0.5 from the edge to the middle of the sphere. So you can put your position at 0.5, and that means that assuming your plane was at 0, which we did at the beginning, that's going to push your ball up by 0.5, and that's going to have the ball resting exactly on the plane, which is probably what we want to start out with. Yep, the cube likewise starts with a height of 1, so it's 0.5, from the middle to the edge. And when you're punching in the position with x, y, and z coordinates there, like we have 0, 0.5, and 0 right now, that's for the center of the game object. That's for the very center. Okay. Oh, there you go. Adding a new material. Very good. And now he's looking for pictures. Okay. Tough to really see it in the scene there. Oh, is the material applied to the ball? I don't think the material is applied to the ball. There you go. Yeah, very neat.
Very cool, David. I love your creativity. I wonder if we could turn this into a music game of some sort, rolling the ball over. I'm not sure exactly, but seems to me that
roll into musical notes.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, David. Great minds think alike.
Very nice. Cool. Yeah, and you know what? There's a bunch of different creative ideas like that. And not everyone has to do the same thing either. We could have one that's music themed, and others that have different themes too. People could start with almost the exact same project, but then just put on different materials, and you'd have something that looks very different. David, could you go ahead and pass the ball back to me? Great, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to share my desktop again. Go ahead and close out of that. Okay, so a couple more things I want to cover here. First of all, one thing I forgot to mention when we were doing lighting is that we can make shadows. If you select your light, you can select your light either by clicking on it in the hierarchy or by finding it in your scene, clicking on it in your scene. And you have an option here over on your Inspector tab on the right-hand side. You have an option for shadows. And I can make hard shadows or softer shadows. And then I can, you can change some options about exactly how the shadows look. And see there, that adds a shadow for the ball. Very, very cool. And so this is more or less what we wanted to accomplish today. There's one more thing that we need to talk about, and that is organizing, keeping our project organized. And so if you look down at my assets pane, boy, I've gotten a lot of different stuff in my assets pane right now. I've got the scene. Okay, this is what I would if I had multiple scenes, I could double click this to open up this scene. In fact, when I double click that, it's just going to open up the same scene again. I've got all these textures. So question from Alex, how do you make the ball move when you press the arrow keys? That is a big question. You know what? We've got some time. Maybe we'll get to that in a second. I want to talk first about keeping things organized here. So I've got all these different textures and materials, and then this scene. What I want to do is I want to, just like you would do if you were keeping folders organized on your computer, I'm going to make folders here to keep all this stuff organized. So I'm going to create a folder and call this scenes. I can drag my scene into that folder. And then I can create another folder called materials. And I can put my materials into that folder. And there are materials inside this, well, this folder that I downloaded actually combines materials and the textures that are used to make the materials. But I'm going to go ahead and put that under materials since there are materials there. And then I might make a separate folder just for textures to keep the textures that I've drawn myself, and then just these simple image textures. And now my assets pane is nicely organized. And when I add, more, when I start adding scripts and other sorts of things, other sorts of assets, sound effects, and so forth, I can create more folders when I need to. Other place we need to organize our project is up here in the hierarchy. Here I've got, right now I just have 5 things. I could easily have more things. For example, what if I duplicate that cube, so I make a second wall. Okay, so now I have 2 walls. I could even duplicate this again and rotate it around. What I would actually want to do is to make an exact 90-degree rotation, I would just type 90 in there. And I'm just going to keep making walls. I can duplicate that guy one more time, right-click duplicate. Okay. And what you should notice is that, well, now I have kind of a cool little little box for my ball to roll around in once I do get it rolling. My hierarchy is starting to get cluttered with a bunch of things just called cube and just with a lot of stuff. So there are 2 things I can do to help organize my hierarchy pane here. First of all, I can give these game objects different names. So I can rename this as, right wall, top wall, bottom wall, left wall. Okay. My plane, maybe I have more than one plane, so I really want to call that the ground. And there we go. Now we're starting to, now we can at least tell what each of these things are just by looking at them. This is still going to get very cluttered, especially if I have a big level with lots and lots of walls and multiple planes and maybe a bunch of some different lights potentially, obstacles in the scene, things, objects that I want to collect, lots of stuff could clutter this up very quickly. So what we can do is just sort of, just like you make folders to put files in on a computer, what we can do is we can make an empty game object. I'll go to game object correct. Create empty, and that's going to create a game object here that this is just called game object, and I'm going to rename it walls. Okay. Now when I have this walls game object, I can click and drag all those walls into that walls game object. Okay, and now it's sort of like I have a folder with all the walls inside the folder. So that's going to help me keep everything nice and organized. And if I had more than one light, you know, I might want to create an empty game object and call it lights, like so, and you know, so on and so forth. So that's a good way to keep my hierarchy organized. So now our project is nicely organized. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left, and this is about as far as I had hoped to get today. So this is good. Why don't we go ahead and do a quick preview of something that we're going to look at in depth next week, which is scripts, and in particular, movement scripts. So a movement script that will make our ball move when we press the arrow keys. And I'm going to go ahead and open up a project that we have made before. And when I open up this project, you notice some of this looks familiar. Well, there's nothing in the scene right now because it's sort of like opened up a new scene for me. But if I want to go to a scene that I've already created, I can go down to my scenes folder that I made and click on this scene. And here's a scene that you'll notice looks kind of a lot like what we just made. I don't have as many walls yet. Notice I actually put in a second light here. This is what we call a fill light. You know, I have my main directional light. This is another lighting trick. I have a main directional light that kind of shines down one way and creates shadows. And then I can have a fill light, which is a little bit weaker light that goes in another direction that kind of changes the color of the shadows so they aren't just so dark. So maybe the shadows will end up being kind of a lighter blue than they would be otherwise, depending on how intense that light is. So the key thing that we want to have a look at right now, as a preview for next week, is the script. And you'll see when I select my ball, on the right-hand side, it shows all sorts of what we call components that we've added to our ball. And we'll see what some of these mean. Some of these, looks like a couple of these are for sound effects. There's the material there. One of these is a script, which we call the player controller. You can name a script whatever you want. The script is called player controller. In fact, here it is in a scripts folder under my assets pane. And so I'm going to double click on that to bring it up in the editor. I think it takes a while to open. Here we go. Okay. So here's our script editor, and we'll walk through this in detail next week. Now here's programming, and you guys have seen, I think all of you guys have seen programming, if not in Unity, at least in Scratch. And this is going to work a lot like Scratch, except that instead of having drag and drop blocks, you do actually have to type out everything. And I think you'll see that we use variables in Unity all the time. Scratch, there are variables. You don't always use them in your Scratch projects, but here we're going to use variables all the time. The key part of our player controller script here is this function called fixed update. Now, a function is sort of like a block of code in Scratch. And each function is going to have a name. And the name of this function is fixed update, and that's a special name in Unity. When you call your function fixed update, that's going to happen, that function is going to run every time step. So every, like every frame. When you see something on a computer, really, or like a video running, really you're just seeing a bunch of images, go by really, really fast. Each one of those is called a frame. Well, this function is going to be called once for every frame, and what this does is it's going to create a variable called move horizontal. And it's going to set that variable equal to this, which is input.getAxis horizontal. And what this does, this is something that Unity has pre-made for us, is that's going to be a 0 if we're not. It's going to be a number. It's going to be 0 if we are not moving, and it's going to be a +1 if we've got the right arrow down, or a -1 if we've got the left arrow down. So that's going to reflect, if you're pushing down the arrow keys. Likewise, move vertical is going to do the same thing, but for the up key and the up arrow and the down arrow. Then to actually move the ball. So really, right now, we're just creating two variables. Just like you create a variable in Scratch, we're creating a variable here, and we're setting it equal to the value that we get from getAxis. And then the function, we're going to call it a function that Unity has made for us. So again, this is a function that we're writing, and inside this function, we're calling another function that has already been made for us. And that function is going to be add force. And add force it's like we're pushing the ball. So Unity has a built-in physics engine. And in physics, to make something move, you push it. So it's going to push it. Add force is going to push the ball. And how hard are we going to push it? Well, first of all, we might be pushing it, which direction are we going to push it? And again, this will all make perfect sense. We'll look at it in detail next week. Which direction are we pushing it? How hard should we push it? And that's what we call, here we're calling that speed. And we can change the speed if we want to. We can change the speed to be, a lot faster if we want the ball to go faster. And then time.delta, we're going to multiply that also by time.delta time, and we'll look at that next week too. Again, this is not, if you're confused by this, don't worry, it's not as complicated as it looks. We'll go through all of this next week. And this is just to account for different computers that have, some computers are faster than others, so your frame rate's going to be different on different computers. So this is just to account for that, so that your ball doesn't go faster on a computer that is faster. And so we're going to do that. We're push it in the horizontal direction, push it in the vertical direction. Right now, we're not pushing it up and down at all. We're not jumping, at least not yet. That's all we're doing is seeing if it moves forward or backward or left and right. And then I can go ahead and click go to start the game. And as I push the arrow keys, my ball is moving around. So that's a preview of the movement stuff that we'll be doing next week. Again, don't worry if you don't totally understand all of that, because we will look at that in detail next week. And it's exciting stuff to learn too. Programming is exciting. Once you learn how it works, you can do lots of cool stuff with programming.
Jacob,
okay.
This is perfect. I loved following this, following your trail through Unity. Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for for joining. Hopefully, hope to see you next weekend.
Great. If you have a chance to work on your own solutions, we look forward to a good show and tell next week.
Oh, and I should just really briefly, before you guys go, there is a great tutorial project that kind of inspired this one. And I'll go ahead and paste this link to the Unity website. On that page I just posted in the chat box, there is a tutorial that they call Project Rollerball, and that is that project is kind of the inspiration for our little tutorial project. And they go through kind of many of the same steps that we're going through. We're going to do a few things a little bit differently, but that's a great introduction to how this stuff works. If you're interested in this and you want to, obviously you're not required, but if you're interested in doing some more work outside of just these webcasts, that's a good place to start.
All right, Jacob. Thank you. Have a good week, guys. Looking forward to seeing where this goes.
All right, see you guys next time.